What's up, everybody? Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums. That's right, it's Sunday morning. Thanks for joining us here today and spending a little bit of time with us. We're going to talk about a very cool band that have been around since the late 60s. They kind of had like maybe about a 12-year career as far as making albums, and then there's been nothing since 1980. But they have continued to tour quite a bit over the last bunch of decades, right? So we've long since had around Blood, Sweat, and Tears, right? One of the great jazz rock horn bands of the last 50 plus years. They always seem to get talked about in the same circles as the band Chicago or Chase or Sons of Champlin, that sort of thing. But, you know, when you really listen to the music of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, not a ton of similarities other than the fact they have horns in the band. They have a horn section, right? But musically speaking, for the most part, Blood, Sweat, and Tears are very, very different from, let's say, Chicago. Much, much more of a jazz rock band, and then later on incorporated a lot of fusion and funk and soul and R&B elements into their sound as well. And to me, they never quite rocked out as much as Chicago did at times, specifically during the Terry Kath years. But as far as like the arrangements and the the horn work, just off the charts. You know, even bigger horn section in most of the lineups of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Of course, you had a semi-legendary vocalist in David Clayton Thomas, of course, fronting the band for a good chunk of their career. Very notable singer. But we'll kind of get into like a lot of the lineup changes and things like that as we kind of go along. So we have 11 studio albums that we're going to talk about here. I don't own every single one of them. I'm missing, I think, 2 of them, 3 of them, something like that. But I have all the other ones. And I will say, pretty solid discography. A lot of good stuff here worth your attention if you've never listened to Blood, Sweat, and Tears before. So let's get it started here. We're going to go with from 1977, and I don't have this particular one. This is called Brand New Day from 1977. It's their 10th album overall. This one did not chart on the Billboard charts. You'll find most of these were, charting albums here in North America. Here you had original member and drummer Bobby Colomby had left the band by this point in time. He was the last remaining founding member. That's what's one of those deals where as the 70s wore on, more and more of the original guys kept leaving the band. So he was like the last holdout from the original band. So he left before this album came out. So there were no original members on this album whatsoever. And he was replaced by Roy McCurdy on drums. But here you did have David Clayton Thomas on vocals. He was not an original member, though. He was not on the first Blood, Sweat, and Tears album. And he also kind of came and left a couple times. And then by this point and going forward, it was basically kind of like his band, basically. So you have some pretty good stuff on here, though. Somebody I Trusted, Put Out the Light, kickoff track. Upbeat, funky rocker loaded with horns. And Mike Stern, yes, that Mike Stern, legendary jazz fusion guitar player, was in this band for a couple of years, played on a couple albums. He's on this album. He's got a nice little stinging guitar solo on that particular song. You got Same Old Blues, kind of a swampy blues rocker with, again, some more gritty Stern guitars and really fine vocal performance from David Clayton Thomas, which is... adds to the kind of the grit of the whole song. It's kind of like a southern rocker almost. You have a song called Gimme That Wine, which... grooves quite a bit. It's got some tasty electric pianos, a lot of good fusion stuff going on, musically speaking, in a lot of these arrangements. You got big, huge horns on Rock and Roll Queen, another really good track. However, that's only a couple songs. The rest of the album, to me, is pretty forgettable, I think. So that's easily the bottom one for me. So that's Brand New Day, 10th album, coming at number 11. Coming at number 10... we're going to go with their 9th album from 1976, which is this baby right here. Yeah, I mean, that was the cover of the album. It's basically just like a snapshot of an actual piece of vinyl here. And that is called More Than Ever from 1976. It's their 9th album overall. This one barely dented the charts. It showed up highest at number 165 on the Billboard album charts. Here we have Mike Stern, first album with the band, replaces George Wadenius, who had been... in the band for a few albums. Lots of other member changes going on this album. You got the horn players coming and going and bass players coming and going. Plus, this one was produced by Bob James, the great Bob James, keyboard legend, and he brought all sorts of session players into the studio to help out here. So you got like Steve Kahn and Eric Gales and Richard T, a whole bunch of other guys helping out on guitars, keys, and horns and things like that. The music on this album has a very strong jazz and funk vibe. The song "They" kicks off the album. Really cool song, lots of groove, horns, electric piano. You got David Friedman, who also guests on the album. He brings like percussion and vibes to most of the album. It sounds great on this. You got the dreamy ballad, I Love You More Than Ever. That's kind of bland. That was like the single from the album. Don't really care for that too much. Katie Bell, kind of a fun slice of jazz pop. It's got a great sax solo. Sweet Sadie the Savior. It's got a really nice chorus. They utilize some female backing vocals on this album, which kind of helps. It's got a brief little guitar solo from Mike Stern, which I like. You got the big bouncy song Hollywood, which is another one of the highlights on this album. Got horns and funky keys and guitars all permeating heavy blue, which also kind of dips into the disco bag a little bit, right? But it still has plenty of groove to it. It's got a pretty nice guitar solo from Mike Stern as well on there. So overall, some good stuff on this album, some really forgettable stuff on this album. So it comes in at number 10 for me, More Than Ever from 1976. All right, next up for number 9, we're going to go to New City from 1975, which is this bad boy right here. Okay, it's their 8th album. This one made it to number 47 on the Billboard charts, pretty much driven by the fact that David Clayton Thomas came back on lead vocals. He had been gone for a couple of albums, and I think the 2 albums that came out before it, maybe due to him not being in the band, people were kind of losing interest. That happens, when you have like the classic vocalist in the band, he leaves, whatever. So him being back in the band, I think, raised a lot of interest. So this shot up to number 47 on the Billboard charts, did pretty well. It's not a bad album. You got a cover of the Blues Image classic Ride Captain Ride, which this band did a ton of covers. It's one thing I wanted to stress here, especially on the early albums. I mean, most of their albums are all filled with covers, but they usually do a really good job of giving their stamp on the song that they're covering, so it doesn't sound exactly like the original, which I think is kind of cool. So being as these guys are kind of like a jazz rock horn band, they pick all sorts of songs that weren't necessarily that in their first incarnation, the original version. So sometimes you listen, you're like, wait a second, is that song? Holy shit. It's like, so we'll talk about that quite a bit going through these albums. So Ride Captain Ride, it's kind of funky, it's jazzy, some horns, electric piano from Larry Willis. Really, really cool. I like their version. I think it's very cool. You got the funky grooves of Life, another good song. Then you have the super fusion funk instrumental No Show, which is just awesome. It's got soaring horns, got a stinging guitar solo from George Wadenius. Excellent, excellent track. They do great instrumentals too. This band, and I'll touch upon this many times during this ranking, if these guys had ever decided during their career when they were making albums to just become like a all-instrumental jazz fusion, jazz rock band, jazz funk band, they would have been amazing, because the musicianship is stellar on all of these albums, and they generally do drop in an instrumental or sometimes 2 per album, and they're amazing. I wish they would have done more than that. The vocal stuff is great too, but man, some good chops in this band. What else we got here? I Was a Witness to a War is kind of dreamy. That's okay. I don't really dig the twangy one-room country shack, but there is the 8-minute Applause, which is a real adventurous piece. It's got lots of soloing. It's got some gentle moments, some more rockin' moments, lots of solos. That's pretty cool. Yesterday's Music is an upbeat track. Kind of dig that quite a bit. Not much into the song Naked Man. And then there's also a big, bright take on the Beatles classic Got to Get You Into My Life, which sees David Clayton Thomas in fine form. I like the fact they have all these extra horns and stuff going on there. It sounds really good. Overall, somewhat spotty album, but plenty of good moments, and I think Mr. Thomas sounds really good. Part of me, though, kind of misses the vocals of Jerry Fisher, who was the guy that was on the previous 2 albums. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So, New City, coming at number 9. Number 8. Another one that I do not have. So Nuclear Blues from 1980. This was their 11th and final album. All but David Clayton Thomas remained from the previous album, and now he's kind of like running the show completely here at this point. So again, the album did not chart at all, but it's got this great song that kicks it off called Agitado. It's an upbeat, funky fusion piece, blazing horns, drums, keyboards, terrific song. Sounds like the Brecker Brothers. obviously Tyler doesn't want to listen to me talk about Blood, Sweat, and Tears anymore. Title track is a good funky rocker. They do a really interesting cover of Jimi Hendrix's Manic Depression, which, quite frankly, is how I want to hear a cover song. Because, again, they totally transform Manic Depression. We all know how Manic Depression goes. Just think of it with, instead of all this guitar, it's got loaded with horns, right? They give it their own spin. The horns dominate. It's just absolutely terrific. Yeah. Unbelievable. That when you own Huskies, they want to be in the room with you, and then they want to be out. They want to be in, they want to be out. If you don't let them in, they'll whine on the other side of the door. If you let them in, they'll whine to get out. And then as soon as 5 minutes from now, she's going to whine to come back in. Never happy. Never happy. Anyway, we love them anyway. Where was I? Let's see. You got a lengthy slow blues tune called I'll Drown in My Own Tears. You got Fantasy Stage, that's kind of bluesy as well. And then you have this closing epic, it's like 15 plus minutes, called Spanish Wine. It's like a 4-part suite. Terrific jazz rock, plenty of solos, and again, another example of how if these guys ever wanted to do like just all instrumental music, fusion, jazz rock, funk type of thing, they excel at it. Great stuff. I really like that track a lot. It's called Spanish Wine is the big long piece. Excellent, excellent, excellent. To me, if this is their last album ever, which probably will be, they went out on somewhat of a high note. It's not a bad album at all. A couple kind of bland tracks, but for the most part, really, really good stuff. So Nuclear Blues from 1980 is my number 8. Number 7, we're going to go with Mirror Image, which is this one right here. This is their 7th album from 1974. This one made it to number 149 in the Billboard charts. By this point in time, one of their founders, Jim Felder, left the band. So here now we only have founding member and drummer Bobby Colomby in the band. So each album, more original guys would leave, and so now we had, just the one left, the sole original member. So Fielder's gone, but the big horns are still here. But there's a bit of a change on this album. There's much more of like an R&B soul feel throughout this album. And even though it's 1974, you're starting to hear some of the things that would permeate a lot of the disco albums that would come a few years later. But it's not bad though. This is not a bad album at all. And of course, this features Jerry Fisher on vocals, who I think is really, really good. And he's singing up a storm on this album. So you got the opener, Tell Me That I'm Wrong. So, groove machine with killer horns, great vocals, got strings. You got the funky Look Up to the Sky, also really good. Again, they're really utilizing backing vocals really, really well in the band by this point in time. You got tasty guitars and funky grooves all over. Love Looks Good on You, Your Candy Sweet. Really nice song. I like that one a lot. Then you got Hold On to Me, kind of a bland softy, as well as Thinking of You, kind of more of the same. And also, Are You Satisfied is more of the same as well, but there's some really nice, tasty electric piano and horns on that particular track, which I think kind of saves it. And then you have the 11-minute multi-movement funky fusion of Mirror Image, which is great. You got grooves everywhere, wah-wah guitars, guitar solos, excellent stuff. And then the closer, As She's Coming Home, is, again, kind of like this pre-disco bland softy, which I don't really care for that too much. Overall, I think some really strong songs here on Mirror Image, though the album overall is kind of patchy, but what's good is pretty damn good. So that's coming in at number 7. All right, coming in at number 6, we're going to go with Child is Father to the Man, their debut from 1968. I know many of you were like, what? Because this is a pretty beloved album, I think, by many, many people, but it's really different. It sounds completely different than everything else in the catalog. So, like I said, debut album, 1968. The band at this point was kind of formed, put together by Al Cooper, right? Yes, that Al Cooper, who plays keyboards and sings on this album. And this incorporates, rock, jazz, blues, pop, classical, little psychedelia. To me, listening to this album now, this album really sounds dated. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it sounds like it's from 1968. But this album was not a success at the time. It barely cracked the top 50 album charts. but it really represents, I think, the late 60s eclectic music scene because it's just got so much going on in it. It's really well put together. There's great horns on here. You got Randy Brecker and Jerry Weiss, Randy Brecker from the Brecker Brothers. Jerry Weiss is on here as well as the really good lineup. Got this haunting blues track, I Love You More Than You'll Ever Know. Great song. Steve Katz is the original guitar player. He played on a number of albums. He's add some nice guitar here and there, but this band, especially early on, was not much of a guitar band. They always had a guitar player, but you barely heard him half the time. You got nice sax from Fred Lipsius also. You got Morning Glory, nice lush song. You got My Days Are Numbered, big soaring track, loads of horns. You got the quirky jazzy pop of Without Her. Just One Smile, really catchy. You got lots of upbeat horns on I Can't Quit Her. You got the interesting little psychedelic pop of Megan's Gypsy Eyes. You got psychedelia and a little bit of rock on House in the Country, more psych on The Modern Adventures of Plato, Diogenes and Freud, and then you have the big and bright finale, So Much Love /Underture, which is a pretty cool album song. Overall, I think this is an interesting album. It's a fantastic and intriguing listen. There's a lot going on here. It's very easy to get into, but it's really different sounding, I think, from the rest of their albums. And it's interesting how this, like I said, this band always gets compared to Chicago so often. I mean, you listen to Chicago Transit Authority, the first Chicago album, and you listen to this, they don't sound anything alike, other than the fact that they each have horns on them. Chicago, much more rock-oriented, where I think these guys were much more jazz-oriented. And here, there's even all sorts of other things going on. So, so this is my number 6. Like I said, probably will rank a lot higher for a lot of other people, but that's okay. I like it. I dig it. Number 5, we're going to go with Blood, Sweat, and Tears 3 from 1970, their third album. Big seller. Made it to number 1. This is number 1 selling Billboard charting album. Lineup pretty much stays the same from the previous album. You got Heidi Ho, fun jazzy rocker that kicks off the album. That was a single as well. You got Lucretia MacEvil, which is great upbeat jazz rock tune, another single from the album. I always like David Clayton Thomas's vocals on that. Really, really good stuff. And I think he gives a rousing vocal performance on this whole album. He's really, really good on that. Again, the horns shine on this album. This band is never really all about guitars, but you got a fiery Lucretia's reprise, which is really cool. They do like a little jazzy take on the James Taylor classic Fire and Rain, which is pretty neat, although somewhat unremarkable for me. They've done better covers. You get the mellow pop of Lonesome Susie. Then they do a cover of the Rolling Stones' Sympathy for the Devil, and they title it Symphony for the Devil / Sympathy for the Devil. So they give it like a kind of like they turn it into like this big kind of jazz symphony thing. It's pretty cool because it's like horns, it's psychedelic, it's jazz, it's rock, interesting stuff. You get a really nice He's a Runner, okay? And then they do a big upbeat cover of Joe Cocker's Something's Coming On, which is pretty cool. And then they end the album, once again, because they've done it many times in their career, with a cover of a Traffic song. They apparently like Traffic quite a bit. They do 40,000 Headmen on this particular album, which is pretty good. Fun album. Perhaps too many covers, but I guess you can kind of see that, say that about most of their catalog, or at least the early ones. But some really good stuff on here. Really what sounds well produced. Some great tracks on here. So yeah, that's number 5, the third album from 1970, Blood, Sweat, and Tears 3. We're going to go for number 4. We're going to go to Blood, Sweat, and Tears 4 from 1971. All right, this one went gold. But lineup changes were coming, as always with this band. Go Down Gamblin' opens up the album. Love that song. That's probably like the first time in their catalog where they actually do a hard rock song with some serious guitar muscle. Great guitar licks from Steve Katz on this one. Love Go Down Gamblin'. It's great. You got the jazzy Cowboys and Indians. You got loads of horns on the big soaring John the Baptist, which was, I think, the first time they collaborated again with Al Kooper. I believe he co-wrote that song with them. You got the fast-paced, groovy tune called Redemption, which has some killer horns and drumming. You got some tasty lead guitar on the melodic Lisa Listen to Me. You got the emotional High on a Mountain, features another stellar David Clayton Thomas vocal. Mr. Katz takes the lead vocal on the lush Valentine's Day. You got the spirited kind of jazz rock cover of the Doobie Brothers classic "Take Me in Your Arms, Rock Me a Little While." Again, another one that you start listening to it, and first you're like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." Then you hear the chorus, you're like, "Wait, I know that song," right? So pretty cool. Not that big on the kind of boring "For My Lady," but I do like the big, brassy, and quite sassy "Mama Gets High," which is a really cool tune. And then the album closes with the nice little tender jazz instrumental, A Look to My Heart," which features just piano and trumpet. Really, really nice. Like I said, these guys could have been a straight up jazz band, and it would have been terrific. So, really strong album. Blood, Sweat, and Tears, number 4, comes in at number 4 for me. Let's move on to number 3. Probably the one that will rank number 1 for many people, and I couldn't argue too much. I just happen to like 2 others a little bit better. But Blood, Sweat, and Tears, self-titled, from 1968, their second album. Okay, this made it to number 15 on the Billboard charts and was multi-platinum. I believe this sold 3 million copies, something like that. Here you had Al Cooper, Randy Brecker, Jerry Weiss, already gone from the band. So once again, a big upheaval in the lineup. New singer David Clayton Thomas brought into the fold. You got a few new horn players. You got James William Guercio, of course, the great Chicago producer. They brought him in to produce this as well. He was working with Chicago at the same time, so doing both. Music here taking on much more of a brass-driven rock and jazz style. So there are lots of differences between the first album and this one if you listen to them kind of side by side or back to back. The opening Variations on a Theme by Eric Satie is kind of a great example of late 60s jazz rock. They do a cover of Traffic's Smiling Phases, which again shows off Clayton Thomas's excellent vocals. And like I said, they do numerous covers of Traffic songs throughout their catalog. And they turn this kind of very psychedelic, British psychedelic song into a real tight jazz rocker. It's a really interesting cover. I really dig it. You get the lush pop of Sometimes in Winter. You get More and More, killer song, right? Great vocal organ and horns. You get the memorable And When I Die. You get a bluesy take on the classic God Bless the Child. Of course, their big hit Spinning Wheel. Terrific song. Big brash horns, another killer vocal from David Clayton Thomas. I mean, Spinning Wheel is absolutely terrific. I used to remember hearing that on the radio all the time when I was a kid growing up. Also, their other big hit single from this album, You've Made Me So Very Happy. Another huge hit. You get the awesome bluesy jazz pop with soaring horns, great chorus with that track, just awesome stuff. You have Blues Part 2, which is like this kind of like jam for them. It's like kind of towards the end of the album, and it's like 11 minutes long. You got lots of experimenting going on. You got some great organ from Dick Halligan, drum solos, all sorts of other stuff. So really interesting track there. And then the Variations on a Theme by Eric Satie finishes. They reprise that again towards the end of the album. So great album. It's their biggest seller, probably for a reason. Obviously, it was driven by a bunch of really big hits, memorable songs, and like I said, could rank higher. But you know how it goes. Sometimes you just like other albums a little bit more than the big huge album, right? Nothing wrong with that. So I'm going to go. Number 2 is going to be from 1973, their 6th album, No Sweat, which is this one right here. And this little 3-on-1 set from BGO Records. Gotta love BGO Records. Their 6th album overall made it to number 72 on the Billboard charts. So here, founding member and guitarist Steve Katz had left the band. He's replaced by George Wadenius. Now we have Jerry Fisher. Okay, this is now his second of the 3 albums that he appeared on. In the lead vocal slot, replacing David Clayton Thomas. So this is his second full album with the band. And here you see the band going even further into jazz rock and fusion and funk, right? So opening track, Roller Coaster, tons of groove, great funk rocker with lots of horns. You get the kind of haunting blend of gospel and jazz on Save Our Ship, which is a great vocal from Mr. Fisher. Really like his voice a lot. You got gorgeous horns and acoustic guitar on the short Django, little instrumental. Obviously a nod to Django Reinhardt. You get more guitar and horn funky rock on Rosemary. You get another great instrumental in Song for John, which is another terrific track. Great horns on that. You get, big bright grooves on this great rhythmic thumper called Almost Sorry. And then you get lots of screaming guitar licks on the hard rock and Back Up Against the Wall. That's like the rocker on this album, and it's good to hear them rocking out every now and again. And then there's this deep funk instrumental, Hip Pickles, which is another killer song. Then you got, more tender stuff, because every album's got some softy stuff. You get this like jazzy blues piece called My Old Lady. Another great vocal from Mr. Fisher on that. You get another Traffic cover, right? So this one is Empty Pages, which I absolutely love. Empty Pages. Really good, really funky on here. Again, they do justice some of these Traffic covers. Really, really good. You get the piano-led Mary Miles, and then you have this incredible, might even be one of my favorite Blood, Sweat, and Tears songs, but it's an instrumental, it's this funky fusion monster called Inner Crisis. It's got some killer grooves on it, amazing electric piano, guitars, horns. It's incredible. Go listen to Inner Crisis by Blood, Sweat, and Tears. If you like instrumental fusion, instrumental rock, whatever, check it out. Really, really good stuff. I think this is a really enjoyable album, and I'd say I probably like some of this later stuff. Or this is actually not later. This is like mid-period stuff. I like the mid-period stuff, I think, even a little bit more than what everybody kind of deems the two classic albums are, right? The real classic albums, or even the first three albums, right? Because those are generally looked at as their classic albums. But yeah, I love these albums. I think these are really good. So, and my number one is New Blood, which is right here. If you can see it there. Here we go. This is from 1972, New Blood, their fifth album, made it to number 32 on the Billboard charts. You got David Clayton Thomas has left by this point. Fred Lipsius is gone. Dick Halligan's gone. So Jerry Fisher comes into the band. He joins on vocals. He has more of a bluesy style, but a really good rock style as well. And you can hear it right off the bat on their cover of Bob Dylan's Down in the Flood, which features lots of rock guitar. It's got harmonica. But it's good. It rocks. I dig it. Lou Marini, also here in the band on Woodwinds. He stays for a few albums. Of course, the great Lou Marini. I remember growing up as a kid, and Lou Marini was a member of the Blues Brothers band, right? I was like, the great Lou Marini. You got bluesy Touch Me. You got rousing jazz rock of Alone, which has plenty of wild horns and stinging guitar from Steve Katz. One of his, one of the tracks I think where you hear more guitar from him than any other, and I think if you're a fan of classic Chicago featuring Terry Kath, you will love the song Alone. Really, really good. You get the lush Velvet, the quirky horn-drenched pop of I Can't Move No Mountains. There's more funky rock on Over the Hill. Got great melodies of So Long Dixie, and then there's this cool song called Snow Queen, which is just terrific. Has some great soloing on electric piano. You got trombone and sax. Excellent song. And then a stellar cover of Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage. That takes some balls to go and cover a classic like that, right, on your album. But man, they do it justice. And it's interesting because they throw in, Steve Katz throws in a nice kind of cool little almost George Benson-ish guitar solo on this one, which is really neat. So it's a really good cover. Overall, despite all the lineup changes and everything like that, I think New Blood is a really strong album, and it's my favorite out of the catalog. So, yeah, that's my number one. So I will run through the ranking. So New Blood comes in at number one. No Sweat comes in at number two. Self-titled Blood, Sweat, and Tears comes in at number three. Number four is Blood, Sweat, and Tears 4. Number 5, Blood, Sweat, and Tears 3. Number 6, Child is Father to the Man. Number 7, Mirror Image. Number 8, Nuclear Blues. Number 9, New City. Number 10, More Than Ever. And coming in at the rear, number 11, Brand New Day from 1977. So there you have my ranking of the great Blood, Sweat, and Tears, one of the great horn bands in rock and roll history. Could also say jazz history, right? Because a lot of jazz on these albums, but very, very cool stuff. So let us know if you are a fan how you would rank some of these albums, whether you want to do the whole catalog or do your top 5 or whatever. And if you haven't listened to some of these and you're kind of like a casual fan, maybe I've given you some impetus to go out and check out some of these albums and see what you think. So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. We also have down below the links to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, as well as our merch page for all sorts of cool Sea of Tranquility stuff. So stay tuned for another episode of Ranking the Albums. Coming up a week from today, we will be ranking the short but very, very cool ranking of a band from Sweden from the 70s called November. They are kind of like a very much a cult band who were kind of like a combination to me of like Cream and Mountain from Sweden, and they sung in their own native tongue, right? So you got non-English vocals, but man, if you love the big crunchy blues rock, heavy blues rock riffs of Cream and Mountain, and you've never listened to November, you are really missing out. So I will be ranking, I believe it's three albums. I'll be ranking those a week from today. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you then, right? So take care, everybody. Tune in on Tuesday for In the Prog Seat. We'll see you for In the Prog Seat this week. We also got UK Connection this week, and of course each and every day, don't forget, at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we've got another of my favorite guitar riff masters of all time. So that's we're doing that daily all throughout the month of April. So till later, I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.